Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to England once again and we're going to have a look at another of the beers that I bought from the House of Trembling Madness down in York. Awesome beer shop if you can get there in person, but otherwise you've got a great web shop on there which is very, very good value. So do make sure you check them out if you get the chance. You'll find some really, really good stuff on there. So for this one, we are going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before. These guys have made their name making the German beer styles, which, as you'll know if you've watched the channel before, I really quite enjoy. And this is one that was recommended to me by the English beer tubers, so I have to admit I am really looking forward to this one. So for this review then, we are going to return to Hartlepool in the northeast of England, and we're going to have a look at my third beer, if I'm remembering rightly, from Donzoko Brewing Company. So this one is called the Festbier. It comes in at 5.6% ABV, and they're describing this one as a deep gold lager beer. So yeah, I believe this was the release for Oktoberfest, so I am getting to this beer a little bit late, but the English guys spoke so highly of this one that I just felt, you know, I really want to have a go at this one actually. So yeah, very, very curious to see how it turns out. The last beer I reviewed from these guys was the Northern Hellas, which was given to me by my good friend Adam over at Mersey Beers. Do make sure you check out his channel, but that is one that I'd wanted to try for quite a long time actually, and I have to say I was very, very impressed with it. So I have to say, very, very curious to see how this one turns out. As I've told you many a time on the channel recently, I'm going through a little bit of a lager phase at the moment, so this is one, like I said, that I was very, very curious to try. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Donzoko Brewing Company before, and you will see more added to that list in the near future, I'm sure. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite a lot at the moment because I am home in the motherland of Scotland, and I've got a good selection of English stuff to work my way through, and we are getting English beer fairly regularly in Sweden these days too, which is great. So you will see that list added to regularly, and if you do want to as I say, see more reviews, you can subscribe. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely, hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Donzoko Brewing then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Donzoko Brewing are based in Hartlepool in the northeast of England. The company is headed by Rhys Hugill. As I think I'm pronouncing that right, Hugill, I'm not quite sure. But Rhys started home brewing back in 2014. He studied chemistry at Newcastle University and then later at the Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich. But it was during his time in Germany that he really developed a love of the German style of beers. And you know, I had the same when I was at Heidelberg University. I just kind of fell in love with the Helles beers and things like this, so can't blame him for that at all. But he was due to study his masters, but he decided that he wanted to do something else. And after having had some success with his home brewing, he decided that he wanted to found his own company, and with the help of savings and grants from both Newcastle University and Hartlepool Council, he got this up and running properly back in 2017. So originally they were brewing the wort at another brewery and then transporting the beer in bags to their own premises where it would undergo fermentation. But then in more recent times they have just been gradually building up their own operations in Hartlepool. But over the course of 2020 they were planning to invest in their own brew kit and things like this and add some staff to the brewery. But I think because of the whole COVID-19 situation, that plan has had to go on hold. So we'll see how that happens throughout 2021. But they're also brewing a number of beers under contract, if you like, down at Gypsy Hill Brewery in London, and that's where the Northern Hellas is brewed. That's why it's in a can, and a couple of the other beers are in the bottles. But as of December 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 40 different kinds of beer. There's a number of paleos these days, there's a few IPAs in there and black IPAs, but like I said to you, most of the beers that they produce are various different German styles, different lagers and things like that. The very first beer that I reviewed from these guys, in fact, was a Doppelbock, and that was why it caught my eye, because I love German Doppelbocks. The Scottish sweet tooth, obviously, is the main thing there. But yeah, I love my Helles beers. I love Dunkels and Schwarzbiers and things like that as well. The Czech lagers are also very good actually. So these guys are a brewery that I do like to look out for every time I'm back home in the motherland of Scotland. But yeah, definitely one that I would like to have on the channel at some stage for a Meet the Brewery segment or something like this. So maybe we can arrange that at some point later this year. We'll need to see, because I do need to go down to Durham and visit a couple of friends there. So a wee trip to Hartlepool could be done. It definitely could be done. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Donzoko Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So yeah, like I said to you, this one is a 5.6% lager. The last little bit of my notes that I have here is that this one is hopped with Tettnang, which is Tettnanger are from Baden-Württemberg, kind of quite close to where I was from, when I was studying in Heidelberg actually, and they've also got Hallertau Blanc hops as well, which are really nice. They're almost like a German equivalent of like Nelson Sauvin or something like that, but the Hallertau region of course is in Bavaria. So these two hops, it's quite nice that it's got two hops, both from the different regions. The German hop producing regions, but it's also got a malt base of Vienna and Munich malts, so I think it will be really quite interesting. But yeah, this I think should be pretty nice. But yeah, as I said, I think this was their Oktoberfest release that they did. This one's 5.6% ABV. You can see the cans sweating already. It must be quite warm in here actually. I've not really realised. Either that or the fridge is a little bit too cold. But yeah, this one, as I say, I'm not sure exactly what kind of lager this one is. When it comes to Oktoberfest, Oktoberfest, as we know, started to celebrate the wedding of the Bavarian Crown Prince and his wife, actually, and then it just continued year on year after this. But there was a law in Germany at one stage that they weren't allowed to brew beer between March and, I want to say, September or October, if I remember rightly. So they had a beer that they brewed in March that would go into the cellars underneath, you know, in the rock cellars and things like that, and it would just mature. They'd brew it a little bit stronger in alcohol and things like that, and then it would be released in October. It would be drunk at Oktoberfest, and that was called the Märzen after the month of March. But what's happened more recently, the slightly stronger Märzens have been replaced by what they now call a Festbier, which is a kind of more golden, you know, the Märzen is a more kind of amber type lager, if you like, whereas the Festbiers are now a little bit more kind of golden and things like that. But I think they do have a little bit more of a kind of caramelly and biscuity presence in them, if I remember rightly. So I'm guessing if this one's called Festbier and if it's 5.6% ABV, then it's probably more likely to be one of these kind of newer, you know, one of these kind of newer type Oktoberfest beers rather than the more traditional and old school Märzen, if you like. But yeah, I think this should be quite interesting. You can see it does have the Bavarian sort of checks on the back there, of course, though the Bavarian state colours are white and blue. This one is a more kind of dark greeny sort of thing, but you can see on the back here, this one, it does have the gold D for Donzoko on it, which is pretty cool, and it says on the side here, Festbier is the king of the Donzoko lineup. Released once a year, this deep gold lager beer has a rich malt body thanks to the long decoction mash of Vienna and Munich malts. A generous helping of Tettnang and Blanc hops give way to a crisp and bitter finish. Festbier, a beer worth celebrating with. So yeah, it says it was canned on the 9th of October 2020, and it's best before the 9th of April 2021. So yeah, I'm not drinking this beer at its freshest, but you know, I don't care about that, to be honest. This is one that I just wanted to try. So half-litre can, this one, which is the reason it's a little bit taller. So yeah, it does look pretty damn good, I have to say. Very, very much looking forward to this one. But yeah, plain top on the can. Let's get it out and get on with the tasting. A 5.6% Fest lager, this one, Festbier lager. So yeah, let's have a look at this. Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. This, it is a little bit more kind of ambery, if you like, than a straight up Helles lager, but yeah, it's not quite as you know, coppery, if you like, as a it's not quite as coppery by any stretch of the imagination as a as a traditional Märzen. So remember, you've got lots of different types of lager beer. The definition of lager, of course, is a bottom fermenting yeast, as it's known, cold temperature fermentation, 10, 11 degrees. So yeah, in Germany you have the Pilsners, you have the Helles, you have the Dunkel, the Schwarzbier, the Märzen, of course, is a lager beer too, and you also have the Doppelbock, and then you've got the various Czech equivalents such as the Svetli Leitsak, Černý and Märzen, Černý and Tmavi, sorry, brain's not working. And you've also got the Vienna lager as well from Austria. But yeah, this one certainly does look very, very nice. A lovely natural haze to it. You can see it is a very kind of rich ambery type colour. This one, this beer is at the point where it could pass for like an IPA, like a sort of West Coasty IPA. It's got a nice natural haze, as you can see if I put my fingers behind it there. It's got poured with about a quarter-ish finger of a frothy white head, but that's just fading away to be a very thin foamy layer. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass now, and a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice, I have to say. So yeah, definitely a nice looking beer, this one. But in terms of its colour, I would say a nice kind of bright yellow colour, this one. A little bit of an orangey kind of tint to it, but yeah, nothing surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. It could pass for a West Coast IPA. It's almost the same colour as the Pliny the Elder that I reviewed recently, but yeah, I certainly like the look of this one, so thumbs up to Donzoko in terms of the appearance of this beer. It certainly does the job, should we say. So yeah, nothing overly surprising about the appearance of this one. You can see the head has just faded away to be a very thin foamy layer with a little bit of a ring around the edge of the glass there, but it looks very, very nice. So let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on. Curious about this beer, like I said. Ooh, that does smell quite nice. If I was blind smelling this, I would probably think this was a Helles. Yeah, I would probably think this was a Munich Helles, to be honest with you. It does have, you can smell the slightly biscuity note of the Vienna malts in this one, but the Munich malts, I think the Munich malts must be a bigger component than the Vienna malts in this one. I would be surprised if it's a 50-50 split on the base in this one, although it wouldn't, I would be curious to know that, what the percentage of the malt base in this one is. But yeah, straight on the nose of this one, you get that lovely, smooth Munich white bready malt out of this straight away. It's so distinctive. If you've drunk, the likes of Hofbräu, these other German ones, Paulaner, and if you've drunk all of these kind of German beers, the Munich malts become very, very familiar on the nose, and you get that straight away out of this one. Lovely soft white bread, just a little hint of crispness to it as well. Just a little bit of bread crust too. It's lovely. Really is lovely. You can smell a wee bit of an almost biscuitiness, like a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, and that's the Vienna malt in there. The Vienna malt will give you a little bit of a kind of wholemealy sort of thing, a sort of more brown, almost very, very slightly rye sweet kind of bread actually, although it's not quite pungent enough to be rye, but I think you get the idea. It's got a little bit of that almost rye bread-like sweetness to it. So yeah, you definitely get a bit of McVitie's digestive, a little bit of an almost brown bready character to this beer. But I think the smooth, white, soft, fluffy bread kind of Munich malts stand out most in this. There's a wee bit of a kind of lager type crispness in this one, but yeah, I think it comes across really, really nicely in terms of the malt base in this one. Very, very authentic, and as I've said in other reviews, that is what you want from these beers. You really do want a little bit of you really do want these beers to be authentic rather than doing anything crazily. The Pilsners, the lager beers and stuff like this are a very technically demanding style of beer to brew, so it's these beers are a real test of what makes a good brewer, and Donzoko have a reputation for these, and it's quite, based on the Northern Helles, it's quite rightly garnered in my opinion. But this beer, I think, is going to be along the same lines in terms of quality. But yeah, lovely, lovely stuff, I have to say. Yeah, malt base hits the spot exactly. So it does. I think if I was smelling this straight on, I would probably say it's more. I would probably guess, just if I was blind smelling this, that it's a Munich Helles, I would think. Yeah, that's. This is going to be a really, really. Really nice beer for sure. I like focusing on the malt a little bit more. Everyone's about the hops these days, I think, but personally, I think it just comes from being Scottish and the sweet tooth. As I've said quite a few times, you know, I like a little bit. I like to focus on the malts a little bit. It's in the genes. It's in the blood. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, it is kind of what you'd expect. You get that lovely soft, little bit of earthiness from the noble hops in there. Again, if you're familiar with these German lager beers, this beer gives you what you would expect. It does give you what you would expect. You get a nice little touch of herbal quality in there as well, some nice bright floral aromaticity. As I've said in other videos, the Czech Zatz hop, which is quite a popular one to use in lagers, that's definitely a little bit more spicy. The I think the Slovenian Styrian Goldings, which is another one, that's got a little bit more of a kind of deep aromaticity to it, whereas the German ones, the Hallertau and the Tettnangers, are quite bright, and you do get that nice bright floral aromaticity out of this one, and you also get that lovely kind of grassy component out of this beer as well. It goes together really, really nicely. But yeah, nothing. As I say, this beer has nothing surprising about it in terms of the style, but the aroma is just so nice. And if you're a bit of a kind of lager nerd like I am these days, this beer is going to hit the spot from that perspective. On the fruity side of things, it's got a little bit of appley and kind of peary ester to it, as you would expect, but you can get a little bit of that almost gooseberry-like thing from the Hallertau Blanc in this one. It really has a little bit of that almost white grapey. It's almost like the Nelson Sauvin, to be quite honest with you, but with a more German green component to it. That's a good way to describe Hallertau Blanc. Similar fruity characteristics as Nelson Sauvin, but just a German noble green component to it. And I think you get that straight away with this one, that gooseberry, white grapey sort of thing. Then you've got the apple and peary notes and just a wee bit of that lemony, grassy sort of thing too. But the aroma of this beer has everything that you would want from a sort of Fest lager beer, although I do think it leans a little bit more towards the Munich Helles, but I'm sure the Vienna malts will come out a little bit more in the flavour. I mean, you can see from the colour of this one, remember, this one is a little bit richer in its colour, and remember, colour of your beer is dependent on two things. One, type of malts you use. Two, the length of the boil. The longer you boil the beer, the more the sugars caramelise and the darker the colour you get. And I don't know with these beers if that is something, I don't know with Fest beers and Märzens and stuff, if that is part of it or if it is just the type of malts that they use. I would suspect it's maybe a bit of both. But yeah, let's get stuck into this one and see how we get on. So this one is the Festbier, coming in at 5.6% ABV, the Oktoberfest release from Donzoko Brewing Company, based in Hartlepool in the northeast of England. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål. Oh yeah, that hits the spot for sure. Yeah, it's stupidly easy to drink that, but that's what you want. You know, you want the lager beers to be drinkable. I've said time and time again in my lager reviews, lager beers are so underrated. I know my friend Peter at the Clueless Drinker is a fan of lager beers, and it's he and I have been fans of these for a while, and it's been nice over the last year, I have to say, to see lagers getting a bit more attention, because it's all been about, you know, the old English beer styles, the imperial stouts, the IPAs and so on, but it's so nice to see a number of breweries having a go at these lager beers. And these guys, of course, are one of the more kind of specialised ones, but yeah, I've had some from more IPA type breweries. I've had some really nice lager beers as well, so it's nice to have these as an alternative. I think the beer scene has been a bit too haze craze orientated these days, but we're starting to see the West Coasters coming back, the red IPAs, black IPAs, and the lagers are getting a bit of attention now, which is quite nice. But yeah, it's a lovely, lovely lager beer, this one. So again, it gets a big thumbs up from me, and I'm not surprised, because I know how highly regarded Donzoko are in this style, so I'm not surprised at the quality of this beer. But yeah, I like this one. I'm sure, I don't know if Peter, I'll need to have a watch at see if Peter, Coolest Drinkers, reviewed this one after I've had a go at this one. But yeah, this is very, very nice. In terms of the malty side of things, then we'll kick off with that. This beer actually does have a nice bit of crispness to it straight off. But straight away with this beer, you feel that nice, soft, white bready thing from the Munich malt there. That blankets the middle of your palate. When you go onto the back third of your palate, the beer really gets a little bit kind of more crisp. If I was blind tasting this, I would think there's a wee bit of Pilsner malt in this, to be honest with you, just to give you a wee touch of dryness out of the beer. But yeah, it's nice. It really is nice, this one. And as you go further into the aftertaste, you can feel the Vienna malts coming out a little bit more. You get a bit more of the brown bread and a bit more of the kind of sweetness that you would expect of those Vienna malts. But yeah, I really like how this goes together. Awesome stuff, awesome stuff. So yeah, like I said, soft kind of white bready quality there in the middle of your palate. As you go to that border region between middle third and back third of your tongue, the beer gets slightly crisper. If that makes sense, it just develops a little bit of crispness, which is very, very nice. And yeah, I think that you can feel that kind of coming out. It does get a wee bit drier the further you go into the aftertaste, but yeah, the back third of your palate, I think, kind of smoothens out a little bit more. You do get that crispness there, but the real dryness is on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate. But yeah, it's a little bit more almost brown bready and grainy in that back third of your palate as well. But like I say, on top of that, in the middle third of your palate, on top of that nice kind of white bready, soft Munich malt component, you have in the very centre of your palate, there is a little bit of a kind of sweet caramel in there from those Vienna malts. And as you move further out towards the sides of the palate, there's a little bit more of a kind of, there is a little bit more of a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. So yeah. So yeah, the malty side of this beer, I think, is really nice. It's really this beer, it really develops more of a crispness the further that you go into the aftertaste. I do think there's a bit of Pilsner malt in this just to crispen it up a little bit. I don't think you can get that level of crispness just straight out from Munich malts and from Vienna malts, because those are definitely more kind of smooth, and the Vienna malt's a little bit sweeter, to be honest. I'm pretty sure there's a bit of Pilsner malt in this, for sure. I don't know if the yeast could really do that as well. I think it's more a malty kind of thing. Pilsner malt, as I've told you before, is a really annoying thing to describe because it's really all about the mouthfeel. It just adds dryness to the beer, which really comes out in this one actually. I really like how that goes together, for sure. But yeah, the malt base in this one I think is spot on. Like I say, back third of your palate, definitely a little bit more grainy and brown bready. In the border between middle third and back third of your palate, there's a little bit of a kind of more Pilsner malty type quality. And then as you go as you go into the kind of middle third of your palate, there's you get that soft white bready Munich base, and then a little bit of biscuit and a little bit of caramel in the very centre of your tongue, then a more McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing coming out on the side of it as well. But yeah, I really like how that goes together. So yeah, really nicely done actually on the malt side of things, and that's one of the important things to get. So thumbs up to Donzoko again. I think we've covered the malt base as much as we need to. On the hoppy side of things, back corners of the palate, definitely a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, there is a little touch of a kind of herbal quality to this one, and as you move further and further forward, there's a nice little bit of a big floral aromatic thing about this one. You do get a little bit of spice out of the floral aromaticity on this one, which is quite nice. That builds a good counter to the kind of crispness that this beer builds as you go further into the aftertaste as well. But yeah, I think the more and more I drink of this, the slightly sweeter it gets each time. You do get, as I say, you get a bit more. You can feel a little touch of the booziness. With that brown sugary note that I was talking about, you do get a wee bit of the booziness coming out of the beer, which is quite nice. That's what you want. That kind of reminds me of the Märzen a little bit. The Märzen, you just feel a little bit more of a kind of boozy brown sugar in the middle of the palate with these, and this just gives you a little hint of that, which is nice. That's the kind of key thing about a Fest lager beer, to be honest. It's got a little bit of the Märzen sweetness to it, but otherwise it's more like a kind of Helles, and it's a slightly more crisp version of a Helles perhaps. more like a, I mean the Dortmunder Helles beers are more kind of crisp and hoppy and things like that. So the crispness in these Festbiers comes more from the malt base than the hops, if you like. But like I say, back corners of the palate, there's a little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal-like, and as you reach the kind of front corners of the tongue there, there's a little bit more of a kind of floral. There is a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity out of this one. But then, yeah, as you go round the front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of lighter, grassy sort of thing, which I think is very, very nice. Yeah, I really like how this goes together on the green side of things too. The floral aromaticity comes out of this one. You get that real bright German kind of quality out of this one. The Hallertau Blanc, if I remember rightly, I want to say that that's like an 11% alpha acid hop. That I think is the highest alpha acid hop you get from Germany. So it really does give you just a little bit more of a spiciness to it. So this beer, it has those German noble components, but you do get a little bit of spice out of the floral aromaticity in this one, and that's there on the front corners of the palate. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's distinctly more lighter and grassy. So the earthiness and the slightly herbal quality in there are very distinctively noble. The grassiness is distinctively German and noble as well. But then the floral notes are almost leaning a little bit more towards the American side of things. But that I think is to do with your alpha acid content of the Hallertau Blanc. And remember, when it comes to bitterness, it's all about when you add the hops in the boil. If you add them early, you get more of a bitter component out of them, but as you go through the boil, usually lagers are like I think about 70 to 90 minute boil, it just depends, but as you go through the boil, if you add the hops later, you've got a trade-off between bitterness and flavour and aroma. So yeah, that is one of the things you're going to get from this. I think this is slightly more bitter than you'd get from some of the other Festbiers. But yeah, onto the fruity side of things then. So as I always say, the fruity part of the beer comes out on that front third of your palate, just rolls out in that little oily bubble there. But yeah, if you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a stronger kind of citrusy note coming out of the beer. And as you move further forward, it gradually develops a little bit of that kind of appley, peary sort of thing that you would expect from the Tettnang hops. So you really get that out of this one, but then the front half of that front third of your tongue is Hallertau Blanc, absolutely. So yeah, on that front half of the front third of your tongue, you definitely get a more sort of oily, white, grapey, gooseberry type thing out of this beer, and I really like that. That kind of sits there into the aftertaste, and you do just get a little bit more oiliness on that front half of the front third of your tongue, the front sixth of your tongue, I guess we could say. But then right on the edge of the palate there, you get a nice kind of floral, zesty sort of thing as well. So I do like how that goes together. So yeah, this beer does have a little bit of zesty bite on the front part of your palate too. So yeah, I think this one goes together. I think this one goes together really quite nicely. So yeah, this beer, it's got a nice kind of, this is slightly more bitter, I think, than the other Festbiers that I've come across before. I think this beer does have a good little bit of a bitter bite to it, but I like that. But it does have a really nice malt base there. It's quite like a Munich Helles, but it's just got a wee bit of the Märzen kind of thing to it. I've not had too many Festbiers, but I don't remember the bitterness, but I do remember the malt base being just a little bit more boozy than a normal Helles. So this beer fits that quite nicely, to be honest with you, but a little bit more hoppy and bitter, I would think. But yeah, it's a lovely beer, this one. It gets a big thumbs up from me, and if you're a fan of the lagers, I think you will really enjoy this one. And the mouthfeel then, what would we say about this? I think this is top end of light-bodied. Yeah, top end of light-bodied. Carbonation has a nice little bit of crispness to it. This one, the beer's, it's quite clean, but at the same time there's a little oily component to it as well, so it's clean but oily, I would say. The hoppy bitterness, I think this has got to be about 30 IBUs. I think it could even be 35, a push. This beer does feel a little bit more bitter. I suspect it's the higher alpha acid content of the Hallertau Blanc, and it's probably been used as an early addition hop, I would think, to give you more of that bitterness. So this beer is quite a bitter lager for me. And the malt base, as I say, quite smooth. It develops a little bit of dryness the further you go into the aftertaste, so it does get a little bit drier. But you've got a nice soft white bready smoothness in there, a little bit of a kind of biscuity sweetness as well from the Vienna malts. It's kind of got everything that you would want out of the Vienna and the Munich malts, to be honest, but I do suspect a bit of Pilsner malt in here as well. Fruity side of things, lovely little bit of oiliness from the Hallertau Blanc, and then it's got those typical apple-y, peary type things that you would expect from the Tech 9 hops, and a wee bit of zestiness on the front tip of the tongue too. But yeah, lovely, beautifully executed beer, this one, and I'm quite interested in the fact that I still find this one quite bitter now. I mean, granted, it's only been in the can, actually, I'm miscalculating. It's been in the can about 10 weeks almost, and it's still pretty damn bitter. Actually, it is still pretty damn bitter. So I wonder what this beer would have been like when it was, pretty damn fresh. But I mean, when they're canning it, it obviously needs to sit there and mature a little bit. I don't know how Donzoko do it. Different breweries do it differently. This was canned, as I say, the 9th of October. So I would be interested to hear from the brewery when they would say the optimal time for drinking this beer is. I think I'm drinking this a little bit later, but like I say, I just wanted to try it, but it certainly still goes down very well, but it feels a little bit more bitter. So yeah, that's one of the things. But you do notice that with some West Coast IPAs and things, when it gets just a little touch older, it can feel a bit bitter. The grassy and floral components come out a little bit more. So maybe that's what's going on here, but definitely a wee bit more bitter in my mind. But a lovely beer, and I'm glad I was able to review this one for you. So let's just leave it there. This one was the Festbier 5.6% lager beer from Donzoko Brewing Company in Hartlepool in the northeast of England. The next time I'm home in Scotland, I will be trying to get something else from these guys to review for you here on the channel. I really like this brewery. I'd love to try a Dunkel lager beer from these guys, and I guess trying one of their kind of black IPAs or something could be very interesting as well, actually. So yeah, I will keep an eye out for that. They do have another lager beer that was in a yellow can, if I remember rightly, that I'd like to look at. So yeah, we'll see about getting that done. But in the meantime, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Donzoko Brewing Company. This one was really great to review. The Festbier 5.6% lager beer from Donzoko Brewing Company, Hartlepool in the northeast of England. Until the next time, Slàinte just now, check out my social media, check out Donzoko Brewing Company, and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skull, cheers. Make sure you check these guys out.